Hello, good morning, good afternoon. How is everybody today? Welcome to Frankly Speaking, episode 8. And we are going to get started in just a moment. We'll let a few more people join in. But thank you for joining again, and we'll get started in just a moment. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all for joining today. My name is Frank Raimondi. I'm the host of Frankly Speaking. We are here today to talk about cybersecurity services. And these are, in addition to software that most people are familiar with, from vulnerability management, SIM, to SOAR, to MDR, XDR, you name it, there is a very well needed complementary set of services that we'll discuss today. We will be, just having a discussion with the guests, but we also encourage questions and comments along the way, so you can use that in the question section of the application of GoToMeeting. So please do that along the way. We did get a few submitted questions ahead of time that we'll answer as appropriate and well timed. So today, again, focus is on cyber services. When what's available and when they're needed, and how to best integrate them into your business. So some key takeaways: which services can MSPs build internally, which should they really outsource, how to position these, how to match them up to compliance requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of good value here, I think, that people will be interested. So again, thank you for joining live, and if you're watching the recording, then sorry you missed us live, but we'd love to thank you for joining and watching here. So let me start by bringing on my guest today, who is Kevin Hutchinson from IGI Cybersecurity, basically part of one of my colleagues within the IGI world. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Frank. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So Kevin, there's your LinkedIn description, says that you're a well-experienced industry veteran, but also a U.S. military veteran. So maybe give us a little bit of background on what you do and how you do it, and where you're coming from.
Sure. So about 30 years of IT experience outside of that with the military. Actually, my military experience had absolutely nothing to do with IT, but this was a field that I actually started in high school. I wrote my first program, and I'm not going to say how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago. And
it wasn't in the 2000s. It wasn't in the 2000s, I'm guessing.
No. I'll say it predates Windows. So anyway, yeah, it was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I decided that, yeah, I had this passion for IT, and I pursued it. I have done everything from help desk to developer to running IT practices for organizations, virtual CIO, virtual CISO, and now I head up the cybersecurity practice for IGI, and it's all things security.
Yeah, maybe just kind of do a little quick commercial, get it out of the way from what kind of is your daily life in terms of what kind of most of the services that we deliver. We're going to talk about them in more detail from a generic standpoint, but maybe just describe a little bit more about IGI services.
Sure. So anything from the pen testing side, whether you want to test the internal network, external network, understand what potential threats exist for your environment, we take care of that. That extends out to web application testing for the OWASP top 10. Make sure your web applications and APIs are secure. Moving over to more of the personal services, it's conducting assessments for organizations. Where do you stack up with your controls relative to a specific framework like CMMC or NIST 853, PCI DSS? You pick a framework, and we probably have conducted or are conducting assessments and readiness against those frameworks. Gotcha. We also do physical security testing, looking at the controls you have to physically secure your environment, and Wi-Fi penetration testing as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen some of the fun around that. But we'll get into those a little bit more, and help in particular define what those mean and what the role is. So,
Sure.
in tradition within our podcast, we, since I'm Frank, we had another Frank that was my partner in this to start. But we kind of, who else besides me and is your favorite Frank? It could be historical, could be science fiction, could be military, whatever. Give me a Frank that you admire and look into.
So I'm going to shock a lot of people. Frank Zappa.
Oh, no, that's a good one.
Oddly enough, I really enjoyed his creativeness, his inventiveness in music. It was definitely not mainstream, but I just thought he was a very unique character, and really just enjoyed his musical contributions.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah. Well, if anybody else wants to add a comment into their poll, into the questions, or just another famous Frank, we'd love to hear who your favorite Frank is. All right, so let's get started. So again, some of the key questions and discussions that we kind of highlighted as the introduction to the call. I kind of wanted to start. You mentioned them a bit, but some of the different definitions, and I'll call it a roll call of standard cybersecurity services. So maybe kind of go through those again a little bit and explain what each one does and why, what the relevance of them is.
Sure. So I think the easiest one is that external penetration test. A lot of folks think, okay, I've got a firewall in place, I'm good to go. And as long as it's properly configured and you've got it backed up, you haven't made any changes, you're probably right. But the only way to know for sure is if you test it and make sure that it's patched, make sure there aren't any vulnerabilities that you're not aware of that maybe haven't been patched in your environment. A lot of folks think, okay, I've got a great firewall, my environment's secured. Well, no. The biggest channel that threat actors use today is, and have been using for the last 15 years, is phishing, coming in through emails. Why do I want to spend my cycles as a threat actor trying to brute force your firewall when I can just craft an email, send it out to 100,000 people? I just need one person to click it, and then I own their environment. So that's where the internal penetration testing really kicks in.
Okay.
So for the internal penetration testing, it's looking at what could somebody do if they gain access to your environment, whether it's an internal threat actor, somebody that's got an axe to grind, or somebody that compromises one of your end users or steals their credentials to be able to access your environment. How are they able to move laterally in the environment? Can they move laterally? What data can they harvest from that person's machine? One of the things we encourage people to do is have separate login accounts for your administrative account and your daily user account. Because if you have your domain admin credentials tied to your daily login, and I harvest that credential off of another machine because you've logged onto it, guess what? I'm going to own your entire environment in a short period of time.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of high-level pen testing. What about, like, let's say, compliance or third-party risk management or compliance readiness? What other kind of core services are there?
So those are both services IGI offers. For compliance readiness, again, you can just about pick any framework and we can do a readiness assessment against that framework. And that tells you where you stand relative to the compliance requirements in that framework. If it's a part of your business that is new, say CMMC, which has just come out in the last couple of years, and you're a company that wants to start applying for government contracts, you're going to need to meet the FAR requirements, those 15 FAR requirements. It's the same thing as the first 17 controls for CMMC level 1. So we're able to look at that, tell you if you're meeting the compliance or not, and if you're not, tell you what you need to do, deliver that roadmap, get you on the road to getting that contract. Once you get CMMC level 1, now that's opening up DoD contracts. So it presents a lot of opportunities for customers.
Yeah.
Same thing for PCI DSS compliance. You mentioned third-party risk management. A lot of customers don't really know what the risk is for their environment relative to third-party vendors. You know, if you look back to
suppliers and customers, right? I mean, it's both directions.
Yeah. If you look back at the Target hack, Target was compromised through their HVAC vendor. They came in through a machine that supported their HVAC system and ended up getting into the network, breached, got a lot of data. And if you don't know what your practices are for security for your vendors, something you should look at. That's something we can help with. Tell you what the risk is for that particular vendor and who that vendor's vendors are. So it's basically a magnified view of the supply chain, just supply chain analysis.
Yeah. So kind of back to the compliance elements of CMMC in particular. I mean, from what I understand, and I need to be updated or corrected here, and you're perfect timing. CMMC is particularly focused for Department of Defense, but is there a separate standard for other parts of the federal government, or does people do other groups sort of roll off of say, hey, if you're CMMC, then you can do business with us as well? Where's that? What's the federal government lay of the land?
So right now, the CMMC requirements are only for DoD, but there is evidence that the government is going to be extending those same controls across the entire spectrum of government contracts. Okay. So if folks aren't prepared for it, now's a good time to start looking at your controls, because I said this when CMMC first came out, it's only a matter of time before this starts getting extended to all branches of the government. You know, yeah. DoD is important because they want to protect the defense industrial base, but it's going to extend to every part of the government.
Yeah. So maybe just I'll just double click a little bit deeper on CMMC. So what are the extra things, and maybe just a couple of them, or the kind of the big ones that are different from other kinds of compliance or frameworks? What are they really? Is it just, well, I'll just ask, what are the key elements that CMMC adds to the mix that people are having, oh wow, I got to do that now? I hadn't done that before.
So with CMMC, some of the controls are really tied to federal regulation, federal mandates like FIPS compliance for encryption, that you may have the latest and greatest state-of-the-art firewall, but it doesn't support FIPS encryption, or the FIPS encryption hasn't been validated. So that firewall would keep you from meeting the CMMC level 2 requirements. You know, CMMC right now is at 3 different levels. The easiest one for folks to meet is CMMC level 1. That's meeting 7 practices, ensuring that you're doing what those controls say you're supposed to be doing, and then an executive from your organization signing off saying, yeah, we're doing all of these things. A word of caution, make sure you're doing them, because if you get audited, the penalties are very stiff if it's not the case.
I was going to say the other interesting element of CMMC in particular is that they don't take a self-attestation, right? It needs to be validated by a third party, right? Or different pieces along the way. Right? Maybe describe a little bit of that process there.
Yeah, CMMC level 1 is self-attestation, okay, right? Because you're not handling controlled unclassified information or CUI, right? So that's still self-attestation for those 17 controls. CMMC level 2, different story. You've got to go through all of the objectives, make sure that you're meeting all of the requirements, all of the controls. You have to have the policies in place. You've got to have the procedures in place. You've got to be able to.
Who is just to be clear, who is you? Is that the supplier? So an MSP's end customer.
So that's going to be the supplier to the government, And in some cases, that's going to trickle down. That can trickle down to the MSP, depending upon the services the MSP is providing to their customer. And it can trickle down to subs for that prime on a government contract. You know, if you think about something like a missile, all of the components involved in the missile, who's supplying the fuel, who's designing the rocket engine, manufacturing the rocket engine, who's making the chipsets, you know, all of the components,
hold it all together.
all of those components can be subject to CMMC requirements for those sub-suppliers.
Okay. And so what would be an example of a supplier required level 2 versus level 1? Is it kind of come down to the information they're having access to?
Yeah, that's really it. So if you don't have access to any controlled unclassified information, then you don't have to meet, or you're not required to meet, CMMC level 2 compliance. That's not saying that your prime may not require that of you, but the way the regulation is written right now, it's not a requirement. If you have federal contract information, or FCI, then you should be compliant. As long as it's DoD related, you should be complying with CMMC level 1 controls.
Okay. And then is there a level 3, or is that it, just 1 and 2?
Yeah, level 3 is for really mature organizations, probably your top 20, 30 defense contractors.
So when an MSP is facing either a prospect or an existing customer that's selling to the government or looking to sell, kind of that distinguishing question might be, hey, are you having this unclassified information? Are you doing this? And be more of a resource to them, but also sort of understanding what services needs they're going to need from you as the MSP. I mean, there's some back and forth that needs just discovery, right?
Sure. And those are great questions for MSPs to ask their customers, because there can be some value add for them from the business side. If they start asking their customers, hey, are you doing any business with the federal government? You are. Okay. What sectors of the federal government are you conducting business with? Is any FCI being shared with you? Okay, even though it's not DoD, hey, why don't we get these controls in place for you? Because then you're going to open up that door for DoD contracts.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Okay, well, good. No, that's very helpful. And again, I know in the last 2-3 months, let alone the last 2 years, this has kind of been building up, and there's been some confusion and timing of what the requirements are, and just kind of to throw in a little quick commercial then. So yourself and Wayne, another colleague, are certified under the CMMC sort of test. Well, explain what your certifications are to help with CMMC.
So we've gone through the registered practitioner advanced, and the CCP, which is certified cybersecurity professional. Where one of the things that they require actually is a tier 3 background investigation in order to get that credential awarded. So we're still waiting for that. Unfortunately, that process can be anywhere from 6 months to 18 months.
Oh, wow.
So we're waiting for that. The next tier of training above that is for CCA, and that's the people that are going to come in and audit, and that is our next credential that we're going to be pursuing.
Okay, so the one that's almost there from pending the thing, what does that allow you, just to reiterate, what does that allow you to do that, again, an MSP wouldn't be able to do just to say they could do it? I mean, you've done testing, you've done learning, you've done certification. So what does that enable you to do that an MSP can't do? That, again, I'm just thinking how they could reuse you as a service sold.
Yeah, so we can go into an organization and we can look at where they stand relative to the controls for CMMC, right? We know what the requirements are. We know what to look for in the policies. We know what to look for in procedures. We know what questions to ask people to get that company basically ready for an audit or an assessment.
Like that's a key distinguishing factor there, I think, of what you're helping them get ready. And again, that next level is going to be somebody else. It still is not going to be the MSP that can do that.
Right. The only a C3 PAO can conduct a CMMC assessment, right? IGI is not a C3 PAO. We don't do assessments. What we help organizations do is get ready for that assessment. Yeah. By doing that, they should be able to lower their cost for an assessment, because we'll help them get all of the documentation ready that they need, make sure that the people that are going to get interviewed know what they're supposed to know for the respective controls, and basically streamline the process so when they're ready for that assessment, it should go pretty quick.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, and ultimately it's efficiency, and because once if somebody goes for an audit and they get declined or they don't pass it, then it's all kinds of delays and trouble to get back around, right? So the better prepared you are with your and Wayne's services, the more likely they are to get passed and to not be waiting to continue their business.
And right now there's a backlog. There just aren't enough CCAs, there aren't enough assessors to do all of the work that's out there. So C3 PAOs are backlogged. So if you think if you have a customer that says that they want to go for CMMC level 2, if you don't have that time booked yet, now's the time.
Yeah.
Get ready, get that assessment booked, but be prepared for the work that's going to be required to hit that target date.
Yeah, no, that's valuable. Okay, perfect. Well, good. Well, thanks. Hopefully that made a lot of sense to people. And if it doesn't, then ask another question in the tool here, or come back to us afterwards. So one of the core services that we talked about, and I think that it's most relevant, an easy add-on, if you will, for MSPs, again, something that they can't, or at least shouldn't do on their own, is penetration testing. So, we hear it all the time. There's a lot of confusion of what is a pen test. Sometimes they think vulnerability assessment is the same as a pen test. Sometimes they think whatever. So there's automated, and these are just terms. So maybe you can just kind of just drill into these a little bit. But it's automated, right? It's just kind of or automatic, or just click a button and get a report. And then there's baseline, there's comprehensive. You mentioned about OWASP, kind of a web thing, web application. So if you could just define those a little bit clearer, and when, probably more importantly, when they're most appropriate to do.
Okay. So I'll use Nodeware as an example for vulnerability management, right? Nodeware is great at scanning your entire network continuously and looking for vulnerabilities. And what it does is it identifies the vulnerabilities. It doesn't try to compromise them. And that's the biggest difference between vulnerability testing and penetration testing. Yeah. Vulnerability testing is simply identifying the vulnerabilities that are in your environment. It is a component of pen testing, but it is not a pen test. So that the biggest distinction is, with a penetration test, we're going to try and exploit the vulnerabilities that are identified in the environment. So vulnerability testing is absolutely a part of penetration testing. And the biggest difference is, we're going to look at those vulnerabilities. What can I exploit that's been identified? Are there open ports? Do you have RDP open someplace where it shouldn't be? Can I access that? Do you have Telnet? Do you have an unsecured FTP service running in your environment? Where are the holes? How can we gain access to your environment that you don't want? And a lot of companies are terrified of having a penetration test. And I say that should never be the case. You want us to find those issues for you before the bad guys do. Yeah, absolutely. Think about it in the context of having maintenance done to your car. Do you want to have your car, take it to the mechanic tells you, yeah, it's going to cost $1,000 to fix something in your motor? Okay, don't do it. And your motor blows up. What's it going to cost you to replace the engine?
I use the medical analogy a lot of, you go to the doctor, you get your tests done, you get your heart rate. Oh, they tell you, well, you should do this, you should do that, but until you get on that stress test, right? You get on the treadmill and see if you're really doing what you thought you said you were going to be doing, then you don't know until you know. And again, and exactly. So, and you're using in a online pen or on a full penetration test, you're using basically the same tools that the bad guys are using.
Correct. Yeah, bad guys are using a lot of the same tools that we're using. They're leveraging AI, we're leveraging AI. So, you've got the automated component, which is certain tools are set to just run automated in an environment. We've got scripts that have been built over time that we run against an environment. It's kind of like the Ron Popeil, set it and forget it. And it runs and we wait and see what the results are. So for a customer who's looking for something kind of, I'm going to say quick and dirty, then that automated pen test solution could be viable for them.
Yeah.
The difference is it's somewhat limited in what it's going to tell you. It's quick, but it's not as thorough as having somebody that's a well-trained ethical hacker get into your environment and look and see what's really being or what's available to exploit. Yeah. We've had cases. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We've had cases where we're able to stitch together a couple of vulnerabilities and create an exploit. The vulnerabilities by themselves, you think they're innocuous, but when you chain them together, they create an exploit that gives you access to the environment.
Yeah.
Also, the automated pen testing may reveal something like an unsecured or misconfigured share on a server. Well, in one instance, we were able to access that share because it was misconfigured, dug through the data in the share, and ended up finding hard-coded credentials for an admin in an INI file. That gave us access to the environment that we wouldn't have had just using the automated testing.
Interesting. All right, so we kind of get an idea for automated. So let's go next level is kind of a baseline and then comprehensive. Maybe describe quickly the differences between those two and when they're appropriate.
Well, the baseline is really the automated pen test, because that's just, here's a quick snapshot of your environment, right? Not a whole lot of hands-on keyboard involved. Comprehensive side, that's where we've got certified ethical hackers, we've got OSCPs, people that have been certified to find these problems and figure out how to break down your system to gain access that they shouldn't have access to. So the comprehensive is a lot of hands-on keyboard. It's a lot of in-depth analysis of the data revealed from that baseline pen testing, from the vulnerability scanning, and figuring out, as with a threat actor mindset, how can I compromise your environment? Because the goal is to own your environment so I can harvest your data, spread malware, spread ransomware, just like the threat actors do. We don't do those things because we're trying to protect the customer. Yeah. But that's the mindset that we have when we're going into an environment.
Okay. I think some of that the deep dive in there of the tools. So who typically these days is requiring pen tests? Again, I'm trying to help the MSP sort of think forward on questions they could ask their customers, and how often are they typically done?
As far as the who, that's really going to depend on what their requirements are. It can be something that's contractually required. Most folks in the financial space, healthcare organizations, if you're in the HIPAA space or high tech, you should be doing penetration testing. Oddly enough, most organizations are just trying to check that box, and they're doing it once a year.
Okay. Well, because we offer a service that's more of a monthly or every 6 week, some level of testing. is that again, is the healthcare requiring that? Is financial services? What segments or verticals are likely to be, more than just a once-a-year checkbox?
Right now, there aren't any that are requiring it, to my knowledge. However, I created the PenLogic program because, from my perspective as a cybersecurity professional, it's best practice. If you look at statistics, threat actors in your environment, I think the latest numbers were 263 days before they're discovered. So if you do that pen test today, what happens when the threat actor gains access to your environment next week? You're not pen testing for another year. So they're in your environment that 200 whatever days before they're found out. If you pen test every few months, pen test at least once a quarter, you've got a great snapshot in your environment. Remember, pen test is a snapshot in time. As soon as anything in your environment changes, that pen test goes out the window.
Well, and in particular, I guess one of the things that it surprised me with some customers that you've done a pen test to, and you go back in a year or in 6 months, and you gave them specific recommendations. Here's the risks. Here's the open things. These need to be fixed, or you're leaving yourself open to attack, and they don't do them. So that just baffles my mind of and again, maybe there's budget issues or other priorities, but still, when you've been told that this is an open spot that the bad guys can and will take advantage of, let's close that element.
Yeah, unfortunately, for some organizations, that's the way they approach it, and they're like, oh, we can't afford it because it requires an uplift in hardware. But there are typically compensating controls that can be put in place to really help mitigate some of those risks, and that's where
those are called out in your reports, right? I mean, the end report is here's the key recommendations. It could be hardware, it could be just a fix. I like the scenario you said. I think that the automated and even sometimes the baseline where you might see these three things, and they look okay, it's an open floor, maybe it's something else. But when the three of them are found together, it's like one leads to the other, which leads to the third, which then they're in and open. So those hands-on and that approach, and again, I think maybe just talk a little bit about the value of we'll go back to the OWASP in a minute because I want to go into that a little bit, explain that. But maybe just explain the value of this independence, right? Both from a requirement standpoint, maybe if somebody is required to do pen tests, is it specifically stated that it should be a third party and not the IT department or not an IT, outsourced IT? Is there a clarification on that, or is it just good practice?
It's good practice unless there's a contractual requirement. As far as I know, there's no requirement that says a separate third party must conduct a penetration test of your environment. The requirements typically, you must have your environment penetration tested. So if your in-house team is doing that, I hope they're certified in the tools. I hope they've gone through the training to know what to look for. And if they haven't, your best bet is to look for somebody that has the experience like we have, that knows what to look for in an environment. We've got the certifications, and we can get you where you need to be to secure that environment.
Yeah. So maybe let's go into a little bit of a sales mode. So right, if you were an MSP and you're going to a customer that you think is probably appropriately needs a pen test, what would give me the end user the pitch of why you should coordinate a pen test on my behalf. Again, I've not seen that you should do it, but let's say you're going to outsource it to an IGI or some other provider.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen a couple of schools of thought about an MSP going to their customer about pen testing. One, which I don't understand, is we don't want them to get pen tested because something they may find out. I like the other approach. We want them to get pen tested because if there's something that we missed, we want to make sure we fix it rather than them be compromised and then find out it's something that we missed. So I'd rather partner with MSPs than figure out how do we get your customer secure, because that may lead to other opportunities for you as an MSP to provide additional services to your customer. Maybe it's something the customer decided they didn't want you to do. We go in and conduct a pen test and find out, well, if you had been doing this, the customer wouldn't be exposed in this particular area.
No, that's valuable. Okay, good. Appreciate that. So we got the. So we did have a question that was pre-submitted. Is our solutions able to be sold as components to fill out gaps in existing deployments? Seems hard for the solution, but I think we kind of answered that a roundabout way in terms of the, you know, the value there. But maybe if you got any other insights on that.
Yeah, it's really going to depend. My favorite answer, it depends on what the goal is, what's trying to be accomplished, and then let's figure out what it's going to take to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of that's part of my next question, or set a couple of questions, was about, you know, who's involved in what, right? So again, you're the MSP, you're going to contract out some testing or a service. Who does the partner need to get engaged with, right? In some cases, right, it's not just their normal you know, IT department that they're contracted with, but you might need the CFO, you might need the COO, right? You might need, but it's really between the supplier such as IGI, the MSP or the solution provider, and the end customer, right? There's a lot of sort of coordinating, discovery, process, timing elements in there. What maybe kind of give a nutshell of what all that's about?
Yeah, so the way it works for us is the end customer is our customer, even if they come through the MSP. But we want the MSP involved in the process all the way through. Because we're working in that customer's environment, we need approval from that customer to release data to any third party. So it doesn't matter. In some organizations, it's their IT director. Other organizations, it's the CTO. Some companies don't have that technology staff on hand because everything's outsourced to the MSP. So it's going to be the CFO who's going to loop in the MSP. And we want that communication going all around, especially during penetration testing. We want to make sure we've got the right communication channels established up front, because things can happen in penetration testing. We found that some older printers or print servers can start spitting out reams of paper, blank paper, just because they were scanned, and it's because the equipment's old. So we want to make sure we've got all of that communication laid out up front. So if something happens, hey, you know, you can hit us up through Signal, you can hit us up through cell phone call or email or chat. You know, we want to have open and honest communication during the entire process. Yeah,
that's good. I appreciate that. Okay. One of the other questions was about, you know, and this isn't just for services, but it's for you know, software and stacks that are delivered. But how do you overcome sort of the mindset of denial or disbelief, right? Or you know, particularly the small business, or maybe even a medium-sized business. Oh, we're too small. Nobody cares about us, right? What's your first gut reaction to that?
I'd say you're living in fantasy land, and I'd like to bring you
in a nice way. You would say
that. I'd like to bring you into reality, and that's using statistical information.
Yeah.
Right. So once you start pulling out statistics from CISA, from the FBI, from NSA, and you start showing people, here's the reality. Here's how many small businesses were breached in 2024. And here's how many of them went out of business because they couldn't afford to pay the ransomware. They couldn't afford all all of the things that happened because now their brand reputation is shot.
Yeah, that's a big
So
thing,
they
right?
lost their customer base. Is it worth risking your entire business because you don't think you could be a victim?
Yeah.
You know, how many people in their lifetime have said, oh, it's not going to happen to me? And it did, right? And that's the risk a lot of small businesses take. They look at the cost of a penetration test and figure, well, I'm too small. I'm a small dental office. Who wants my information? Every threat actor on the planet wants your customer information, their medical history, their social security number, you know, all of their PII, so they can sell it. And they'll sell it, so open up a credit card in that person's name, run up a bill, and then disappear.
Yeah, yeah, not to be seen again. No, that's valuable. I think you know, it's amazing what that is, and there's a balance, and we've had this on a previous episode. There's a balance between selling the fear of that and some of that, you know, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and also being educational and being realistic to reality, right? And then it becomes a discussion of the balance between risk and cost, and then that's the MSP's value add, is to get through that. But maybe some of those stats, I would actually be a good follow-up. Maybe it's an exercise for us, you and I, and our marketing team, to sort of pull some of that together, make it digestible and relatable to an MSP that they can pass along. So,
Sure.
So I think that's a good follow-up. All right. Well, I think just just to try and close up and finish before the quarter hour here. Any other kind of thoughts or comments? Maybe you know, things that you really want to emphasize here for MSPs thinking about how to add services?
Yeah. If you don't know, ask. Ask how we can help you grow your business. If you've got a customer that wants some security services and that's probably not in your wheelhouse, come to us. Let's figure out how we can create some synergy between us, what we can do for your customer and do for you. Like I said before, with a pen test, we may find things that an MSP could be offering their customer that they're not, which creates more top line revenue for the MSP. We're good with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think on, you know, my point on top of that is that I mean, MSPs today, right? They've got so many things to deal with, and there's new tools and new regulations and things that they, you know, they're never going to have the time to be on top of all of them or to staff up. I mean, staffing issues are horrendous, right? Just getting people in and keeping them and all that. So, you know, utilize resources that are available. So we'd love to follow up with any of you that are interested to learn more and just have a discussion and, you know, go into deeper talks about how you can build your business around cyber services or add this. And the great news is, if you already got the customers and the contacts, we've got the expertise. It's a great combination to add value to your customer and keep them safer and keep them in business for a lot longer than there might be. So if you would like to follow up, again, my name is Frank Raimondi, F-R-A-I-M-O-N-D-I at IGIUS.com is my email. Kevin is K Hutchinson, K-H-U-T-C-H-I-N-S-O-N at IGIUS.com. We'd love to hear your feedback, any other suggestions for future topics. Again, I'll say thank you, Kevin. Appreciate your time and mind.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Your teamwork, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks again.